Would you like to experience a shift in your career? You may be frustrated to see the same workplace patterns repeat or feel that work lacks purpose, respect, or compensation. To get relief, you may have talked with friends or family, read books, watched YouTube, or taken courses. All good strategies if you get unstuck quickly and move towards your goal. But if you're frustrated with your progress, you need an expert guide to become the hero of your own work story. And that's where I come in. My name is Marie Gervais, and I help people move from work trauma to career transformation. With a doctorate in culture and learning in the workplace, certification in emotional freedom coaching, and as a training and development professional, I've helped hundreds of stuck career professionals gain new insights and release what is not serving them. So if you're ready to turn wishful thinking into a meaningful, well-compensated career and are hungry to experience the power of coaching to get you there, let's talk. Get a taste of what career success could be for you. Go to trycoaching.link/biz. Biz is spelled B-I-S. See you there. Hello, Culture and Leadership Connections podcast listeners. Today, I'm very excited to present to you Wema Hoover, who is an internationally acclaimed speaker and the CEO of Wema Hoover Advisors. She has dedicated her career to being a culture change agent, advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion across global markets through a systems thinking approach, driving organizational change and development in people, processes, and products. Her deep experience spans multinational enterprises such as Google, Pfizer, Sanofi, Bristol-Myers Squibb, and PwC, with a high degree of cultural awareness after living in Europe and working across the US, Asia, Middle East, and Latin America. Some of Wema's speaking topics are turning obstacles into opportunities, harnessing the Black, Indigenous, and people of color women advantage, it's okay not to be okay, activating inclusion to drive well-being and mental health, and opening the aperture, building diverse talent pipelines. Wema, you are a woman after my own heart. I'm so honored to be interviewing you as a guest on our podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. It's such a pleasure being here with you today.
So that's your formal business accomplishment bio profile, but I'm wondering if you can fill us in on a little bit of personal knowledge. Where were you born? Tell us about your family, a little bit about you personally so the listeners can get to know you.
Absolutely. Well, I have the honor of actually being born in the Northeast in New Jersey, but I have lived many places. So I grew up in a small town in New Jersey that is very diverse and really shaped who I am as a person because it allowed me to not only see myself as a Black woman and someone who has a different cultural background and experience, but also allowed me to interact, build friendships, and really focus on bridging my relationships and bridging my understanding of the world through the people that I come in contact with every day, through our neighbors, through my classmates, and the such. And that also gave me a desire to explore and learn more of the world. So I knew at an early age that I wanted to have experiences that transcended New Jersey, the United States, and really experience the world in a way that will help me not only grow, but take pieces of those different cultures and languages and experiences to shape who I am and what I wanted to do in life. And that has been, kind of always the underpinning. And fortunately, I have had the opportunity and work in roles and in jobs that has provided opportunities for me to live abroad, travel abroad, and work across countless countries. I think over 60 countries I have, worked across and been in through all of my work or personal adventures. And that I do consider a blessing.
Mm-hmm. So where did that come from? Tell me a little bit about your parents. Do you have brothers and sisters? Do they have that kind of a global outlook?
Yeah. So my parents grew up in a very small town as well in New Jersey. I don't know if they have a global outlook. I think what they did have was a focus on education and a focus on challenging yourself to be the best, making sure that you realize and fulfill your full potential. And I think that allowed myself, and I have two brothers, so I'm in the middle, and both of my brothers have a clarity and a focus, maybe not on exactly what we wanted to be, but the fact that we had to really do that deep work and exploration in our youth, right? In high school, through our schoolwork, through opportunities, visiting colleges, working in different areas, and actually building relationships across people of different backgrounds and experiences. I mean, my mom's best friends are Italian, one is Jewish. And so we were constantly going to, different events and activities across these different cultures. Then my aunts and uncles were of different religion, Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics, Protestants. So if I think about my upbringing, it was consistent and it was open and deliberate, saying, you know what, all of these things are important because they will give you a perspective and a view of life that will allow you to receive different friends, different experiences, and for you to be able to define what and who you are from true experience and opportunities to just be exposed to the wonderful things that come across meeting people in different parts of life.
Well, in people's families, they typically either get the idea that they should stick with who they know and what they know, or they should explore and be curious and see what's out there. So it sounds to me like your family orientation was more like, let's see what's out there, and curiosity.
Absolutely. And curiosity and also acceptance. Because with that curiosity, it was, wow, isn't that fascinating? How does that help? Or how does that reaffirm what our beliefs? I mean, we grew up as Christians. We grew up in, as Baptists in the church. But what I loved about going to the Kingdom Hall with one of my aunts and my uncle, who was, a devout Catholic, which is Christianity, but definitely a different approach to the religion, was that it was not one was better than the other. It was how can all of these things that, kind of bring together to help reinvigorate and create my own spiritual journey and make it stronger. As with the experience through friends, through relationships, through approaches to culture and traditions, and kind of having a hodgepodge, if you will. And so that was normal, having food from different cultures and backgrounds when we have our holidays and people coming by and celebrating. And what the beauty of that was, there was always an opportunity to learn, but also to grow and share the learning. So there was always some type of exchange, right? Exchange of traditions, exchange of ideas, exchange of even philosophies. And some of them were not all good, right? Some of them were bad. I remember one incident when I was younger and in junior high, because one of my close girlfriends were having a bar mitzvah and wanted to invite me. And, she told me, you're not going to be able to be invited because my parents, don't believe in having relationships with Black people. And I did not feel angry with my friend. We were still very close friends. I understood that. And we both recognized that that was just a mindset that happened within her parents and with her age and within their upbringing, but that it did not impact our relationship. And we remain close friends. But as I talk about the learnings and the exchange, some of them were the hard lessons, right? Of just what the world really is, but still allowed me to, one, have acceptance, but also appreciation of what my journey was and the relationships that brought me along the way.
Right. So that incident that you just described is great because it shows really how you were able to maintain the bridge of friendship and at the same time recognize that there was a discriminatory attitude, and your friend recognized the same thing, but you both realized there wasn't much you could do about it. It didn't impact your friendship. So it's a nice story. I'm wondering if there are some other things that you can think about that influenced your sense of culture and leadership at specific incident as you were growing up. And sometimes they come from a family experience, sometimes come from something that happened at school or in one of the things that you were involved in, or it can be an encounter in the community. But what stands out in your mind?
Yeah, what stands out is the community and how diverse it was. That I have always been in environments, especially when I was younger in middle school and high school, that there was also such a rich plethora of people, of traditions, even in the town. Like, we celebrated everything from Chinese New Year to having, kind of Yom Kippur to having, the Muslim holiday. And this is what we're talking 25, 30 years ago. And what shaped me was that not only was it the norm, but because not only myself, but my friend group were all experienced with that, we sought those out as we got older.
Right.
We always wanted to be in spaces where we can be exposed, we can be changed, we can have exchange. So it also almost made us the opposite of like wanting to be with, in a very homogenous group, not wanting to be with people who look like us, talk like us, believed in us. It actually had the opposite effect because you really gain and start feeling alive and feeling the ability to navigate in a much more thoughtful way with much more empathy, with much more emotional intelligence, because you realize that you have been blessed. I say it was a blessing with knowing that traditions are deep, are long, are standing, and they can't be changed, but you have deference for them, but you can still stand in your spirit and values and navigate through them. And I think that is what allowed me to live abroad in so many countries and not even think twice about it.
Yeah,
because of my experience when I was younger, I was exposed and felt that as the norm. It didn't intimidate me going to another country where I didn't know the language. And I knew that I was going to be faced with different traditions because I was like, oh, opportunity to grow and learn.
Right, right. That is the typical mindset of people that are interviewed on this podcast, though. I really want people to dig a little bit deeper into their more personal experiences. So I'm going to give you an example from when I was growing up. My father is an immigrant from Germany. My mother is first generation born to Polish and Russian immigrants, parents, and we had no relatives growing up. So the people that we associated with, similar to you, they were people that also didn't have relatives. So there were two Jamaican nurses that were regular visitors in our house. My dad's best friend was a Japanese food store owner, and my dad helped him build the shelves for his store. We were constantly exposed to the other people that didn't have any family. And when I think about the specifics, I remember my dad building the shelves and taking me with him, and then the store being set up and seeing the whole thing happen and thinking, wow, we helped build this. Even though I was just a kid, I remember that feeling of helping to build somebody else's livelihood. And it was very strong feeling. And I have a really specific memory of the two Jamaican nurses because they were always giving me advice on how to live better. And I actually appreciated it. One in particular was they came and they asked me if I would show my bedroom to them. And I said, okay. And so I went and the bed was not made. And one of the nurses said, people could come to visit. And what would they think of you if your bed was not made? And I said, well, I better make my bed then. And ever since then, I've made my bed every time as soon as I get up in the morning. I was so influenced by that. Wow, if my dad's friends think I should make my bed to make a good impression, I'm going to do it. It's a little thing. But for me, those two things were not little because they speak to the influence of other people in my life at a young age that I was absorbing and believing in, and that other people may not have had that same experience. Absolutely. So does that give you some idea about something more specific that you can tell the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of my mom's dear friends, she was Italian, and she's still my mom's dear friend and my biggest champion. And I noticed whenever we would go over to their house, which was quite frequently because it's one of her best friends, and she would, aside from having just the best food, the large amounts of food, if you ever said you like something, literally she would give it to you. So I would remember before we go to a house, my mom says, do not say that you like anything. And literally, her name is Antoinette. And he would say, oh, what a pretty necklace. Oh my God, you want it? Here, you take it off. Because literally, and I don't know, that this is a culture thing. I find Italians are giving and are open, but she would literally take a chain off of it. I mean, actually one, I think I have a chain still. I said I wanted it, and she gave it to me and refused my mom to give it back, which I realized that my mom was not joking me. She said, don't ask nothing, but with something that was so endearing to me because I knew that it was not only the custom of love, but it's a showing us whatever I have is yours. If I invite you to my home, it's like inviting you to in my heart.
Yes.
That you have a place in my heart and my world. That will forever be the case. And quite frankly, it has, because that was when I was younger, and she's still my mom's best friend today. They just went to the pool to exercise yesterday. And that shaped me, right? Because the caring, the love, and the extension of that. And we weren't, honestly, difference wasn't seen there, like black, white. That was never even something that came into the relationship, but more so around the custom, and that this was a tradition. If I invite you in, whatever I have is yours. And the seriousness of that was something that shaped me, in that I saw my home and the invitation to my home as a place where people can feel not only welcomed, but feel loved, feel that is an extension of somewhere that they can feel valued, feel included, feel like they belonged. And so that is something that I've always took for me and stands out for me as a monumental moment, and also because my mother always told us, before you go over there, do not say you like everything. Her friend giving us things off the wall in the pantry or
no kidding. You like this chair? Take it. Yeah. I've also had that experience. Thank you. That was a great moment. From the groups you were born into, because you're always born into a context, right? What would you say has most influenced your sense of culture and self now?
Yeah, I think, being born into the African American community within our culture was always around hard work and living your potential. And I think that's because my parents grew up during the civil rights era. And my grandfather was, served in, World War II and, really experienced a tremendous amount of discrimination coming back to the shores. I mean, he was fluent in German. So you say German because he was stationed in Germany for many, many years. And literally when we live in New Jersey and would go to like a meat market in German, I remember as a young child hearing my grandfather speak fluent German because that's where he's coming from. And so their way of thwarting that and being able to give us power, being able to give us opportunity, and to really have, a place in this world that we can call our own was to encourage us. And not only encourage, it was more forceful to focus on school, do not let opportunities go, and understand that if you're given an opportunity, it may never come again, right? And it was, for growing up, it was a kind of a hard reality because you just want to be aloof and just want to have the experience of being a child and experimentation and swaying one way, choosing another way. But it was really instilled in us is that you may not have that chance to get it again, to be offered multiple opportunities, because although the world has changed, many things have stayed the same.
Yeah, they
And
sure
so
have.
there was a level of maturity that I feel we were given at such a young age, where that honestly, if I got a C on any report card, I was on punishment for like 6 months. Like excellence was the bar, and anything below that, I was going to be held accountable to.
All right.
I'm grateful for it today because it's instilled in me a discipline and also a belief and understanding that when you have an opportunity or when you're given the platform to influence, to perform, you got to see it as time to deliver, right?
Yeah, you have to be ready to stand and deliver.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, seize the moment, right? Seize the day, carpe diem, seize the day.
Yeah. And you don't say, oh, gee, I'm feeling a little bit uncertain about this right now. You just go, you know what? Stand and deliver.
Absolutely.
Right?
Stand and deliver. I appreciate that. However, I do have a sadness as well because I felt like I had a level of maturity placed upon me so young that I did not have the ability to say, oh, I'm going to take a gap year. I mean, literally, and I'll say this, and it may sound harsh to some people, but it is the truth. We're told if you don't go to college, you can't live here. I mean, it was that basic. It's like if you're not going to be productive with your life, then you're going to be unproductive outside of there. We'll give you the space, we'll give you the structure, we'll give you the opportunity to flourish and realize all of the potential you have. But if you choose not to, that is not something that we're going to endorse. And honestly, all of my brothers, we went to college right after, and there was no possibility that we were not going to go. But that reality was always looming there is that step into it, seize the moment, fulfill your potential, whatever it may be, but take action and don't leave anything to chance or by the wayside if you're given opportunity.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's a good philosophy. It's served quite a few generations quite well.
Absolutely. And honestly, I have a 15-year-old daughter and I am mindful of the maturity piece. However, I do absolutely give her similar counsel in that you have a higher expectation burden to really be able to be thoughtful about what impact you want to have in this world. I'm going to support you, give you opportunities, and get you exposed to things. But there needs to be focus and clarity so that there is a path forward when you get out of high school, because it's going to make your life, your ability to, really drive and put all of the things that you need in place to fulfill whatever you want in your heart's desire in life. And so I do share that. Probably not as structured and directive as my parents were, but I have adopted that. And I'm quite frankly, to your point, I think it's a good one, especially in today's world where so many other things that may not have a defined approach, kids just assume that they can fall into, which some kids can be influencers, make thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the probability of that is very low. And so I do think being grounded and encouraging kids, as I were, to really think about what their path is and at least have a focus and a plan to fulfill what they have, what they want in life and their fulfill their dreams is critical.
Yeah, if you don't set yourself any kind of a noble goal, you don't get anywhere. So I'm all for the stand and deliver philosophy. And when one of my daughters was 15, all my children are musicians as well as having other talents and skills that they can do. But we were at an event and a person who was supposed to perform canceled. And I said to my daughter, you're going to take that place and you're going to do that. And she said, but I don't want to this time. And I said, too bad, you're going to stand and deliver because there's a need and you're going to fill that hole. And so I went up to the organizer and I said, my daughter will perform. And she got up to the stage and she said, I just want you to know that I'm only doing this because my mom is making me. And then she sang, and I mean, she's stunning. So she just stunning performance. And afterwards, I was surrounded by people. She was surrounded by people, but I was surrounded by people, all young girls saying, how can you make my mom make me do that?
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah. And the whole stand and deliver was it, when something would be coming up and kids would say something like, oh, this is going to be hard. And I go, stand and deliver. Stand and deliver, baby. You can do it.
Yes.
Arise to the occasion. And you've done the same thing. And that's what your parents did for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that story that you just shared because it shows that when people believe in you and that there's belief in you, even when you don't believe in yourself, how much wind that gives you. Right?
Yeah,
like your daughter sailed and was able to do that because she knew that you believe and you knew and you did not take no for an answer. And I think if more of that, people can really tap into their greatness early and often.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that story.
Yeah. Well, getting back to you here. As you grow, you choose groups to belong to, right? You get an education, you have experiences, you develop interests and hobbies, you have relationships with people. And so what groups have you become a part of that are influencing you now?
That's a great question. I think right now, I'm going to take a step back because I had that exposure, right? And bug, if you will, because it really did turn into a bug. Like I just was culture curious. I always thought opportunities and jobs and organizations that I can be able to not only be a part of, but learn and grow other people's experiences. One of my roles when I was at Bristol-Myers Squibb and I was working in India, and my professional role was responsible for the organizational development piece of it. I actually joined an Indian collective, if you will, professional association of human resources and organizational development, and kept in contact with all of them there. And I thought that was so fascinating because just what they were managing, dealing with on a regular basis from people and education, access to education that was so different from what our world and what my world was in the United States. And it gave me a respect for just how they navigated. They had to navigate families and providing, food in some senses for the students to go to school, but also educating organizations and the infrastructure, if you will, within the Indian society to create pathways for these kind of students to get internships. And I work with my organization to do that. It was such a awesome learning opportunity that challenged everything that I knew was the norm and took for granted. And I think that has been really the element that has allowed me to make sure that those connections and those relationships I not only tap into for work, but maintain, kind of throughout my professional and personal career. And some of the other things that I would say that, maybe not within a professional organization or groups, but just as a matter of kind of a traveling abroad. I just came back from Fiji and I just, was hired to workforce development for the Southeast Pacific countries for women. And, I met the person who hired me, through work that I had done with business development when I was living in France. And they were working on, really creating programs for women to have entrepreneurship, to have, more roles in business. And that relationship allowed me then to kind of use my experience of work that I was doing in a corporate space and apply it to countries that were underdeveloped and needed more structure and support. And I think if more of us are able to see what's normal and customary for us, but also see the benefits it is of exchanging and learning from friends, relationships, people that may not have the same kind of historical structure or advantages, it really helps us be able to refine and deliver and partner and support in a much more, impactful way. And that has benefited me professionally, but also personally, because it keeps me grounded. It keeps me really more global, because this is what outside of the developed countries are
So-called
really struggling
developed.
with it. Exactly. And I think making sure that you challenge yourself and seek out relationships with people that are in different socioeconomic statuses, different cultures, different
That's
genders,
the most
different
difficult
lifestyles.
barrier to cross, really. One of the
Mhm.
most difficult would be socioeconomic. You could be an HR professional and sail across the world and always find something in common with other HR professionals at your level, probably around the same income or similar. As
Yes,
soon as you go higher or lower, you're out of your element. It's really hard to
absolutely.
find commonalities when you move up or down in the socioeconomic status.
Yes, absolutely. And this is why, for me, working through charity and nonprofit organizations is so important. Like, one of the organizations that I volunteer is a local organization that supports children in foster care. And myself, my daughter, and a community organization that we're a part of, we do not only hands-on donation, through kind of supporting through Thanksgiving, but even center the children that are in need and what they need, right?
Mm-hmm.
For, the Black children, Black hair care products, making sure that they have access to that and are given something that meets their cultural needs, for all the children, doing holiday wish lists, go out and shopping and bringing that to them and wrapping them. But always, to your point, ensuring that we understand our privilege, our opportunity that goes across all of the dimensions of diversity, age, race, socioeconomic, but then giving back and staying connected. In today's world, where like what's happening in external world and society is infecting us in many ways through the pandemic, through racial and social justice, having the ability to empathize and understand the conditions of those that are around us and those different socioeconomic classes, races, is so, so critical, because we have to come to a point where, we see each other as helping the conditions of, our fellow citizens.
I like what you just said, going back to the piece about charity and the Black hair products. Everybody has a privilege in some way. So if you're Black and you have Black hair, your privilege is to understand what Black hair products work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
resource that you've got that
Yes,
in a shelter that's run by people who don't have Black hair, it wouldn't even
exactly.
occur to them. It
Absolutely.
wouldn't occur to them at all. They wouldn't even know. It wouldn't even cross their radar, right?
I would not. And kudos to that organization. They ended up having racial equity circles. And so they did racial equity circles, not only to focus on Black children, but to focus on Hispanic, Asian, all of the different communities of children that were in their systems, on how they can be served net better. And
Yeah.
if there
Yeah.
were any cultural needs. And so, yes, it is. And the thing is, which I say and we speak to, it's with great intent. You just don't know, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
just not knowing, right? And this is where the communication, building relationships, making sure you stay connected with, those across difference, right? That are not in your everyday world, is so important, because now we're able to deliver and provide and galvanize a community to do it. It's not only us, we're kind of bringing other people to do this as well.
Yeah. Culturally appropriate stuff makes a big difference to how people feel connected, how they feel served. One of the organizations that I work with, they work to help settle Pan-African immigrant families. And during the pandemic, they really became aware of food insecurity in a much higher level than they had before. And so they started their own food bank initiative that served African families from 6 to 12 different countries. So not everybody had the same food needs. But what was really interesting about that is they partnered with Red Cross and also with the city food bank. And when they went to the food bank, there was an entire wall full of dried fish. And the person that was there with a forklift was saying, yeah, we're taking all this dried fish and we're throwing out because nobody eats it. And the two women who were there, who are from Ghana, they were just, no, don't do that. Everybody in West Africa eats dried fish.
Wow.
Let us take 10 of these now and ask, how many pallets can you put aside, so that we can come back every week and bring a few more, because we've got lots of people that would eat this.
Yes.
And they don't eat like canned mushrooms and Campbell's soup. And that's what
Yes.
the food bank's giving them. So
Yeah.
it was like, it's such a great story.
Absolutely. And just of knowing, right? That
Mm-hmm.
this is where kind of bringing cultural differences together, it produces the empathy and understanding that is needed. Because what I feel like right now, that with the pandemic and quarantining and everyone having to kind of be in their own space, I felt like what's happening in the world in terms of injustices and discrimination hit people so profoundly because they
Oh,
did
yeah.
not have any noise.
Mm-hmm.
So their hearts were hit, their minds were hit, their spirits were hit. And I feel like after that, I do sense like a higher consciousness of wanting to do good and wanting
Yeah,
to
me too.
understand.
Mm-hmm.
That I think, like the example you just shared and what I shared about the Black hair care products, it makes it that much more palatable because people want to know, how can we serve you, right? Because we've been affected and no longer can have the distractions of the world, silencing out or giving us the opportunity to ignore them. And I one that I hope that we lean into and that people don't forget and continue to grow. And I feel that there is a spirit of it that should be propelled and should be, managed and also brought to their young folks.
Can you tell me a little bit about, temperament and personality for you? People are born with certain things, even with their babies. They start to have, you can see their temperaments evolving, and then personality develops through opportunities or obstacles that are overcome or not overcome, and you start to build on that. But what would you say was your temperament? What were you born with? And what have you added on to later?
So I definitely was born with a love of people. And when I mean that, I get energy from connecting with people, from having really meaningful conversations and learning from people. And I'm a nurturer at heart. So I will hear a story or speak to someone. I had always been kind of oriented to this and kind of go into problem solving mode. And I think that with people understanding and knowing their orientation, that they don't choose professions. Sometimes professions choose them just because their nature gravitates to that, right? Or it gives them opportunity. And I definitely feel like that has been the case for me. And I do feel like through my desire just to really get energy from people, loving kind of that culture curiosity. And I think that was honed through the experience of meeting and being surrounded by people of different backgrounds and experiences and being a nurturer, that it really shifted me to be an advocate and really think about how I can help other people and particularly the underserved. And because I have a discipline to me, and again, I think this was from my rearing of seizing the opportunity, being very focused and thorough about kind of my own life, my own journey, it actually allowed me to adopt that approach to the work that I do, kind of going into, I have a psychology undergraduate degree, going into organizational development and my graduate studies, and then being pulled into this diversity, equity, inclusion space, working abroad in India and actually seeing, wow, these discovery working teams can't connect, but it's because of culture, hierarchy, status, understanding each other better, like cultural competence. And that definitely called me, right? And gave me energy because I was able to really understand how to tap into what people, I think, generally wanted to do good, but didn't realize were obstacles because of their own orientation and how their own programming. And it allowed me to see myself as an advocate in a very systematic way, right? Looking at the conditions, the environment, looking at what we bring through our implicit associations, looking at some practices or cultural norms that we don't even realize we're putting in place that are either helping or hindering. And I definitely see that. And, when you get to know yourself and you do the Myers-Briggs and all of those battery of personality tests, it's quite fascinating because you see them and sometimes people are like, oh, I've been through that. But then if you take a step back and take stock of it, I'm like, okay, so how, if I evaluate what it's assessing me to be and then how I show up and what I'm doing, typically you see some strong correlations there. And once we are navigated and oriented and accept who we are, not only the great things, but also what our limitations are, what our blind spots are, boy, it makes us so powerful and can allow us our passion to meet our purpose in a much more impactful and magnified way. We know what we're strong at, right? We build on our strength, but we also know where we have opportunities and really account for that. So that has been a fascinating growth process of evolution and self-discovery that I've had that I continue to do because, we're all in a learning journey, every day of our life, but has been very beneficial to me.
That's true. That's true. So you've probably had millions or at least thousands, but can you recall one incident when you experienced a sense of cultural shock and you felt that, wow, what I thought was normal is really only normal to my experience?
Yes, I have. So I'll share when I moved to France, I lived there for 4 years. And I remember going into this big role. And of course, what I just described, my orientation being people. That is my way of, that's going to be my secret sauce for integration. And I was talking to some coworkers in the office, and I moved to the 16th arrondissement. And my arrondissement had this particular bakery that had moelleux chocolat, which is a special dessert that is very good, but they only make it in certain parts of Paris. And so I was talking to a few coworkers, and they were like, "Oh, we love this dessert. This is wonderful. You know, when we can find it, our whole families are happy. We buy them all up." So I had the brilliant idea. I said, "Hey, the patisserie that's on the corner of my street has it. You know, this weekend, why don't you tell me what areas of Paris you live? I'll buy some. I'll bring it over to you. You can have it." And then there was like a nod and a smile and, okay, great. And I think this happened on a Thursday morning. So I sent a note reminding them, "Hey, don't forget to send me your areas. I'll be a way for me to explore the city, get to know Paris more, and I'll bring these wonderful desserts to you." Didn't hear from them. So Thursday, before I left, Friday morning, sent a note. "Hey, do you remember share with me the areas you lived in? We can either meet at your place or somewhere around." Didn't hear from them. Friday, at the end of the day, nothing. "Here's my cell. Text me if you want to still meet up this weekend." Nothing. Radio silence the whole weekend. So Monday morning, I get called in, and HR calls me in and sits me down and said, "I understand that you have been reaching out to, I think, 3 coworkers, and we received a complaint that you were trying to find out where they live and wanted to understand their background and their areas that they live in. They felt very threatened." And I was shocked. I said, "What were you talking about?" It's like, "Well, typically we don't go over to coworker's house here." And there was a threat being felt that you were asking them where they lived. And that can be perceived as you being a leader, because I was a senior leader, really trying to put some social distance because you live in a particular area of France. And if I can tell you, I felt like I had just been gut punched, because I did that with, one, what came natural to me, which was connecting with people. And 2, what was good intent, trying to do something and give these colleagues something that was close to me. And that was a cultural learning, because I realized then that, in the culture, there is definitely a separation between work and personal, right? And especially the relationships that you can go to lunch, you can have coffee, you can have wonderful, long-standing.
You could have brought the desserts to the office for
exactly. I could have bought to the office, but me wanting and having kind of my American orientation to develop a deep relationship, I'm like, sure, I'll go to their neighborhood. I'll take it a step further. They'll see me as kind and considerate and want to develop.
But they didn't. They felt threatened. That's a really good example. And also points to the fact that people think that just because they have good intent, that it should be received with open arms. That's really typical.
Absolutely. Yes.
And it's not the case. It's really more test the waters and see, how do people do this around here? Or if I want to do this, what would be the appropriate way to do it? And that people only start to discover that when they run into a few brick walls. So that must have felt like a brick wall to you.
It was, because when I was in India, there was the exact opposite.
Everybody's inviting you over, and everyone.
Literally, I got invited every day of the week. I had to, at least 4 days of the week, I had to make sure that I was ready to spend 2 to 3 hours in the evening after work at one of my colleagues' homes. And at their home, I would meet their husband, wife, grandfather, niece, nephew, uncle, brother,
everybody.
I would meet everybody. And this was on a regular basis, because in India, you were not able to establish a very credible and, kind of deep working relationship that was based on respect and appreciation, unless you knew them personally. Their model was like, I want you to know me as a person. You need to know my integrity, my family, and all of their family and personal life was an indication of who they were as a person. So that was like a process, like a means to the process of actually developing deeper working relationships. Well, I applied the same methodology, but it was an epic failure because it was the opposite, and that's where, to your point, is understanding and accepting the culture differences, but having a deference and respect. I wasn't angry. I was more hurt because my feelings were hurt, but I, apologized to my colleagues and my coworkers and shared that I brought, and I did do just what you had said. I brought the
desserts, right?
Desserts into work. And
You're making me hungry, by the way.
That deference and respect is key.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we're reaching the end of the interview. And I'm wondering, when people hire you to come to the organization or to meet with them and do something or to speak, what brings out the best in you? What's something that would help people to provide the right context for you so that you can be yourself?
Yeah, for me is when there is a desire to collaborate on different ideas. I think the openness to be in a place where you can have exchange of different ideas and different thought process and ways of working. That is key, I think, on a number of reasons. One, so that there is not like a uniform approach being used, but it's a thought process of how can I help you be the better you? And having the openness and willingness to partner and collaborate. So high collaboration, high openness and exchange is definitely kind of key for a working environment where I thrive and then I can actually deliver and bring the best in my work and services.
Awesome. So what would you like to promote? Here's your soapbox moment.
Well, I would like to share that Wema Hoover Advisors is an organization that has two arms, the executive coaching, which I do, executive advisory council with organizations, focusing on all work that deals with diversity, equity, inclusion. Now, primarily, there's been a lot of focus on environmental, social, and governance models and frameworks, really dealing with some of the things that are happening in our world from a social climate that is impacting the organization operations and ability to unify and activate the workforce. And Be Limitless Consulting is my diversity, equity, inclusion consulting business, where I go and I help support all of the activities with regard to strategic development, execution and alignment to organizational practices, and training and pull through of all of the things that will help drive a diversity, equity, ambition from idea to practice and action.
Great. What's the name of that consulting again?
Be Limitless Consulting.
Be Limitless. So it's
Yes.
Be Limitless Consulting.
Yes.
Got it. And then we'll put everything else. Wema is spelled Wema, Wema Hoover. So
Right.
we'll put all of that into the show notes so that people can look you up and check things out and move towards you, which would be great. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we end today?
Yeah, I've written several articles on what we just talked about, kind of cultural exchange. And so that's on my website as well, in National Association of Mental Illness and also within diversity magazines, and also how to activate diversity, equity, inclusion in pragmatic ways, all of which you can access from my website, wemahoover.com. So thank you so much, Marie, for bringing me on. Thank you for this really wonderful exchange. I think it's great where we can share stories and help show the world what molds us and help us create our path or what calls us to our paths. So I appreciate the opportunity to share.
My pleasure. Honored to have you on the show. Thank you, Wema.
Thank you so much, Marie.
Learning openness to culture as a child prepared Wema Hoover for life in multicultural spaces around the world as an adult. She nonetheless had to go through the cultural school of hard knocks when she enthusiastically assumed hospitality would be the same across countries and had to make an about face to ensure her colleagues were not offended when she showed up at their doors with desserts. Strong influences growing up were her parents, who were honed in the civil rights era, and a Black grandfather who was fluent in German from being stationed in Germany as an adult. A family culture of excellence helped her to be disciplined, and she later softened that with developing her collaborative powers and expanding her natural personal warmth and self-awareness. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it with a friend. Pop over to our webpage, shiftworkplace.com/podcast, to rate and review the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast and check out some of the other guests. Thank you for listening, and may Culture and Leadership Connections continue to guide and inspire your day. Want to show some appreciation? You can buy me a coffee. What? How do you buy a coffee for a podcast owner? Well, there's a way. Let me explain. You go to buymeacoffee.com/Marie Gervais. That's spelled MARIEGERVAIS. So it's buymeacoffee.com/Marie Gervais. And when you go to that website, what's going to happen is you'll get a chance to click on 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 cups of coffee at $5 a piece to help contribute to the cost of the podcast. And yes, it's $5 for a cup of coffee because it's quality coffee for a quality podcast. So I hope you will contribute and you'll help us to reduce the costs of the podcast by going to buymeacoffee.com/Marie Gervais. Thank you in advance for your generous contribution.